compensate, compensate, compensate. So, you want to know about the word compensate, right? Well, it's a verb, which means it's an action word that tells us what someone is doing. The most common usage of compensate is to describe something that makes up for or replaces something else that was lacking or missing. For example, if you're feeling tired from working too much and then you take a nice long weekend off, the relaxation can be seen as compensating for the lack of rest during the week. You'll often hear compensate used in business settings to talk about payment or benefits that make up for something negative, like the company will compensate employees who were affected by the factory closure. Just a note, when using compensate, you should be careful not to confuse it with compensate for. The phrase for is what makes the sentence correct and indicates what the compensating action is replacing. In a job interview, when asked about your previous work experience, you might say, I was at a startup that had to let go of some employees due to budget constraints. But I took on additional responsibilities and helped my colleagues compensate for their lost workload, which ultimately contributed to the company's success. This is an example of formal usage, where the word compensate implies making up for or replacing something that was lost or lacking. In a casual conversation with a friend who just got into a fender bender, you might say, don't worry about it. I'll help you compensate for the damage to your car by taking you out for dinner tonight. Here, compensate is used in a more relaxed way, where it means making up for or paying back something that was lost. In an academic article discussing environmental policies, researchers might write, to mitigate the effects of climate change, governments can invest in sustainable infrastructure projects to compensate for carbon emissions and reduce greenhouse gas levels. In this case, compensate is used in a more formal and technical sense, where it implies making up for or offsetting something that was lost or lacking. So you want to know about this concept? Okay, so, when we talk about something that helps make up for a weakness or a lack in a situation, think of it like filling in a gap. Imagine you're building a bridge, and one part is missing. You need some extra material to make sure the bridge is strong enough. That's basically what this concept does. It provides some extra help or support to balance out something that might be uneven or unfair. It's often used when there's been some kind of disadvantage or injustice. Like if someone has been treated unfairly and we want to level the playing field for them. In simple terms, it's about making things fairer by giving a little extra to those who need it, but in a way that feels right and doesn't create more problems. Component, component, component. So, you want to know about the word component? Well, let's break it down together. As a part of speech, component is a noun, which means it refers to a person, place, thing, or idea. In common usage, we often use component to talk about parts that make up something bigger, like a component in a machine or a component of a meal, meaning one of the ingredients. You might also hear it used in more abstract ways, like talking about components of a plan or a strategy, meaning different parts or elements that work together. What's interesting is that component can sometimes imply a level of importance or significance, like when we're discussing key components of something, emphasizing their crucial role. So, to sum it up, component is all about breaking down something into its individual parts and being mindful of the emphasis on those parts' importance. Here are 3 practical example sentences using the word component. In a formal academic setting, you might say, The professor emphasized that understanding the individual components of the ecosystem is crucial for predicting its overall behavior and dynamics. This sentence uses component to refer to a part of a system or structure, highlighting the importance of analyzing each element in order to comprehend the larger picture. Contextually, this example might be used in an environmental science or ecology course. In a casual conversation with a friend who's planning a trip, you might say, "I'm trying to pack light for my vacation, but I need to make sure I have all the necessary components, like my phone charger and adapter, so I don't get stuck without them." Here, component refers to an essential part or piece of equipment that's needed to complete a task or function. Contextually, this example might be used in a conversation about travel plans or preparing for an adventure. In a business meeting discussing the development of a new product, you might say, "To ensure timely completion of the project, we need to break down the requirements into manageable components, like software development and hardware manufacturing, so that each team can focus on its specific tasks." In this example, component refers to a distinct part or aspect of a larger system or process. Contextually, this sentence might be used in a meeting with product developers or project managers to discuss task allocation and resource management. So, you're trying to figure out what a part of something that serves a specific purpose means. Think of it like a tiny unit within a larger system, like a brick in a building or a gear in a machine. It's an essential part that helps the whole thing work properly. In language learning, this concept is helpful when thinking about the different parts of speech. Like nouns, verbs, and adjectives, each one has its own job to do in helping us express ourselves clearly. You might also think of it as a building block, or a piece that fits together with others to create something bigger. For example, in a sentence, you could have a noun, the thing itself, a verb, the action it's doing, and an adjective, a description of the thing, each one working together to tell a story. Consent. 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 So, let's break down the word consent. As a noun, it refers to agreement or permission given freely by someone for something to happen, especially in a romantic or sexual situation. In common usage, consent is often used in phrases like informed consent, where someone has been fully told about and agrees to a particular procedure or activity. For example, you might give your doctor informed consent before undergoing surgery. Another important aspect of consent is that it must be freely given, without pressure, coercion, or threat. If someone feels forced into giving consent, it's not valid. It's also worth noting that the word consent can imply a level of understanding and agreement that goes beyond just physical actions. So it's often used in discussions about relationships, boundaries, and respect for others' autonomy. In a formal setting, such as a court of law, the word consent is often used to establish the legitimacy of certain actions. As in, the judge ruled that the patient's consent was not valid due to her altered state, and therefore, the medical procedure could not be performed. This sentence demonstrates the importance of obtaining informed consent before proceeding with sensitive or irreversible actions. In a casual conversation between friends, the word consent might be used to discuss personal boundaries. As in, "I feel weird asking for consent every time I want to post a picture of you online, but I didn't want to overstep any boundaries." This sentence highlights how consent can be an essential aspect of maintaining healthy relationships and respecting individual privacy. In a business or academic context, The word consent is often used in conjunction with research protocols. As in, the university's ethics board requires that all participants provide informed consent before participating in our study on social media usage. This sentence illustrates how obtaining consent is crucial for ensuring the integrity and validity of scientific research. So, you want to learn about this important concept that helps us respect each other's boundaries and decisions? Okay, imagine you're at a party and someone offers to drive you home. But you say no because you'd rather walk or call an Uber instead. That's basically what I'm talking about. The idea that we should always ask someone if they're okay with something happening, especially if it involves their body or personal space. It means we need to get permission from them before doing something. Like sharing a photo of them online without their knowledge, or touching them in some way. The main characteristic is that it's all about respecting the other person's right to say yes or no. And it's not just for romantic relationships, it applies to friends, family members, and even strangers too. Some people call this idea informed choice or voluntary participation. But the key thing is that we need to listen to each other's decisions and respect their wishes.